I never thought my perfect life could shatter in an instant. Heather, my wife of 22 years, transformed herself into a goddess and then into a stranger. Her newfound beauty became an obsession, leading her into the arms of another man. I discovered her plans for a Paris getaway with him. Betrayed and furious, I exposed their affair to the world. The media frenzy destroyed their lives, and Heather lost everything. Now, she's left with nothing but regrets, while I move on stronger than ever. Subscribe and share this incredible story of betrayal and revenge. The tempter's name was Vanity, and my wife was too easily swayed. All her life, Heather had been cute but a bit round. After the kids left home, she started exercising. At first, it was just to pass the time. Then things changed a lot. The more she worked out, the better she looked. Her body became her obsession. And soon, she looked like a goddess. That's when the flirting started. For the first 22 years of our marriage, we were close and loving. We stood together at social events. We danced with each other at parties. Now there was such a big difference between my fit, beautiful wife and me, her out-of-shape, middle-aged husband. We started drifting apart. Heather had many men interested in her. It was never just one guy. She talked and danced with all of them. Meanwhile, she rarely spent time with her old friends. They felt insulted and started giving me pitiful looks. But really, what could I do? She wasn't openly disloyal. She might dance with guys younger, fitter, and more attractive than me, but there was never any real romance. She just looked like she was having a good time. She was also happier than I ever remembered. I was willing to wait it out. I had heard of people going a bit crazy in middle age. I hoped this would pass. But it soon became clear that Heather had changed in big ways. First, there was the self-obsession. Heather couldn't stop looking at herself and admiring her body. Then there was the ego. She felt like a trophy, and she knew it. She had this attitude of, I can get any man. Other women hated her for it. Heather didn't seem to notice. Heather's sudden change was easy to understand. One moment, she was an average housewife. The next, she was the center of attention for many men. This big change made her see herself very differently. But this new way of seeing herself started to affect her decisions, and that let trouble into our lives. One important Friday morning, she came downstairs. I was enjoying a breakfast bagel. Her hair was messy, and she was wearing an old robe. She got a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. I saw the serious look on her face. I thought, uh-oh, this can't be good. She said, Tom, there's something I need to talk to you about. Those are words no husband wants to hear. So I put my bagel down and looked at her. She said, I have never had my own identity. I have always been Tommy Jr. and Susie's mom and your wife. But now I have changed. I am my own woman. She stopped and waited for me to ask a question. I said, and what does that mean? She said, I was shy when we met. I had boyfriends, but I was just average. I think it was our mutual lack of personal charm that made us work well together. And we have had an average life for the past 22 years. She stood up and opened her robe. She was naked underneath. Her toned thighs, firm stomach, and well-shaped body were amazing. She ran her hands down her body and said with pride, I'm not shy anymore. She closed her robe and sat down again. She looked at me like she wanted me to understand. She said, men hit on me all the time. I ignore them because I love you. But one special man has offered to take me to a wonderful place. She paused, dropped her head, and whispered, and God forgive me, but I am going to accept his offer. I already guessed where this was headed, and I was angry, but I held back my temper and said, so what does that mean? She looked at me with pleading eyes and said, you don't know him. We met at the club, and since then we have had several lunches together. During that time, he has been a perfect gentleman. I said bitterly, meaning he hasn't tried to get with you yet. She looked disgusted and said, there is no need to be rude. It isn't like that. He's older, very rich, and worldly. All he wants is my company. I looked doubtful, so she quickly added, he asked me to go to Paris with him next week, and I am going to go with him. It would just be this one time. He's married. I said, let me get this straight. You know he's married, and you remember that you're married too? Isn't this cheating? She looked frustrated and said, it isn't like that. I'm only going to be with him this one time. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. After that, I will be yours forever, and I will make it up to you. You'll see. She added seriously, but I have to have one special memory before time changes me. And she gestured down her body again. Her tone told me she was worried about getting older. I said, "That's nonsense, Heather. This guy isn't a gentleman, and what he's proposing isn't romantic. All he wants to do is sleep with you, and all you are going to get out of this are some thrills and a few memories of Paris." I stopped and added, trying to sound firm, "Because I'm not going to be here when you get back." She looked annoyed and said, "Don't say that, Tom. You love me. I know you do. And you will let me do this because we love each other. It isn't like I am sneaking behind your back. Just let me have this one adventure and you will never regret it." She was wrong. I already regretted it. I took her left hand in both of mine and played with her wedding ring. I said with sincerity, "I love you. Including the time before we got married, we have had 24 great years together, and we have 2 wonderful kids, so all I can do is beg you. Please don't go." She looked sad and said, "I'll always love you, Tom. We will grow old together, spoiling our grandkids, but I'm leaving for Paris on Monday." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I pleaded, "Is there any way you can stay?" She looked at me like a kind parent talking to a confused child and said firmly, "It's happening, Tom. Everything is set." I got up and walked out the front door without saying anything. She called out, "Tom!" in a whiny tone, like a teenager upset with their parent. I didn't stop. I drove to the county park. I don't usually cry, but my stomach was in knots. I got out of the car and threw up. I wiped my mouth and sat there looking at the green lawn where my kids used to play. You never think this will happen to you, so you don't prepare. I thought about my situation. I didn't know where to go. Where would I stay? I make good money, but with 2 kids in college and a comfortable lifestyle, we were just getting by. We had little savings, and our credit cards were almost maxed. I had no family nearby, no close friends. I could either stay in the house or sleep in my car. Heather knew our money problems. I think that's why she was so sure she could do this. Hopelessness and loneliness hit me hard. I thought, I put my heart into this marriage and now she's using me? That woke me up and gave me strength. I don't like to see myself as a victim. I make quick decisions at work. If Heather could decide things on her own, so could I. But first, I needed some legal advice. I called Jim Edgerton, a friend and lawyer. I said, "Jim, it's Tommy Meisner." He paused for a moment and asked, "What's up, Tom?" I laughed and asked, "Do you know a good lawyer?" He replied, "Need divorce advice?" He wasn't asking. I answered, "Seems like you saw this coming." Jim said, "Yeah, Heather has been seen with Charlie Wilkins. You know him." Of course, I knew him. Everyone did. He was the CEO of the big company in town, around 60, tall, important, and known to mess around. His wife Maeve was influential. If she liked you, you were in. If she didn't, you were out. I thought, "Heather, what have you gotten into?" When I got home, the house was empty. Heather was either at the club or having lunch. I guessed it was just lunch. Wilkins was too known for anything more in the afternoon. She was already packing for Paris. Seeing the fancy underwear was a shock. I had to sit down for a moment. I pretended to read a book when she came in. She was glowing in her workout clothes, looking great. If I wasn't tied to a desk for 40 hours a week, I might look that good too. She walked to the stairs, humming a happy tune. Then she saw me. She smiled, came over and said, "Let me shower, then you can join me." She was clearly excited. I barely looked up and said, "I'd love to, but this book is really good. I'll pass." She understood. She said, "Don't be silly. I'm still here for you." She looked amazing, but I tried to stay calm and said, "Really, I'll pass." She got mad and said, "Fine, act that way. It won't change anything." Then she stomped upstairs. The weekend was torture. Heather pretended like the coming week was no big deal and treated me like I was ruining her fun. She acted like her affair wouldn't matter. I avoided her as much as I could. She was like a different person, one with no heart. She tried to act nice to me, even showing off some of the things she bought for Wilkins. It didn't affect me at all. I thought my numbness was because I was in shock. The situation was unreal, and I needed time to understand it. Then, I'd feel the pain. Heather's pride was huge. She knew she was beautiful, but also knew it wouldn't last forever. In her mind, a week of romance in Paris would prove she was still attractive. Then she'd come back to me feeling happy, but she never thought about my feelings. Maybe Heather's behavior changed because the kids moved out. It's hard for a mother when the nest is empty. Maybe she felt it was her turn to do something for herself, or maybe she was just losing it. The Heather I loved wouldn't do this. The scariest part was her belief that I would accept her affair and we'd move on because we loved each other. She was very wrong. Plain and simple, I couldn't love a woman who thought cheating was part of her growth. Heather tried to talk about it on Sunday night. I think she wanted me to agree before she left. But I was done talking. I said, "There is no excuse for what you are doing." I looked at her seriously and asked, "Do you realize how out of character this is? And how much this will change our lives? You are throwing away 22 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a happy home for a 1-week fling." She looked at me like I was being mean. Then she said softly, "You don't really mean that. Your pride is just hurt. But you'll get over it. When I come back, I will make you the happiest man on earth. You'll see. This body will be all yours. And I'll love you even more for letting me do this." Whew, talk about being full of yourself. I'm not the kind of guy who thinks of violence first. But it did cross my mind to find someone to deal with her and her lover. On the big morning, I was sitting at the breakfast table with my coffee. Heather came downstairs very excited. I didn't say a word. She was dressed to impress. She wore a modest skirt and high heels for travel, but she had on a low-cut blouse that showed a lot. She came over to me. I think she was expecting a passionate goodbye, like in a story where the loving husband is thrilled that his beautiful wife is going to have some fun. I didn't stand up, so she had to settle for a kiss on the cheek. She was clearly angry at my behavior. At that point, a horn honked. She looked excited and said, "He's here." At least she had the decency to keep the guy out of the house. She grabbed her bag and rushed out the front door, leaving it open. I went over to close it. She had just reached the car. He was waiting, looking handsome and tall. She put both hands on his chest and stood on tiptoes to kiss him. It was the kind of greeting a woman gives her longtime husband, except her husband was standing in the doorway behind her. Wilkins looked up at me and then he smiled. He had done this before, a lot, and he found it funny. Heather turned and waved happily as she got in the back. I didn't wave back. Instead, I shut the door on 22 years of marriage. That was painful. As they say, today was the first day of the rest of my life, which felt untrue. As far as I was concerned, the future was just a wasteland of hopes that were gone. Yet, strangely, I still managed to work well. The part of me that wasn't invested in Heather was focused on my job, and it was calming to sink into the routine of a typical workday. I made a conscious decision to not think about Heather. It worked until she sent me a cheerful text saying they had taken off. It showed how out of touch she was. I was afraid she might keep sending pictures. So I went to the local Apple store and bought a new phone. I ran over my old one as I left the parking lot. Then I looked through the local ads for a place I could move into, right away. In the long run, I might go broke. But for now, I had plenty of money. I make a lot of money, and I had decided to stop paying for anything tied to my old life. As the song goes, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Feeling so free, I bought a double-wide trailer. You can joke all you want about trailer parks. My new place was close to work, had great parking, a nice deck, and was 3 times bigger than any apartments I looked at. The furnishings were brand new, even if they were a bit tacky, and my neighbors were elderly folks, not a biker gang. So it was quiet, almost like a graveyard. On Tuesday, I moved my portable stuff into my new place. My last night in our big house was terrible. Every happy memory haunted my dreams. The pain was unbearable. But in the morning, I cast off my married chains and felt reborn, just like my unfaithful wife. There was a front-page story in the Tribune the following Monday. The headline read, "Playtime in Paris." There was even a picture of Heather and Wilkins looking surprised as they cleared customs. The juicy details were all over the news for 3 days. The coverage included rumors about Wilkins's other affairs. It made for fascinating reading and even got some national attention. I don't know what Wilkins expected. Maybe he thought I would be honored to be betrayed. Or perhaps he thought he was too important to be hurt by someone like me. Either way, he had a lot to learn about his arrogance. He forgot how much the media loves a scandal. So I used Wilkins's own prominence to stir up the press. It just took a couple of phone calls and some basic facts. I don't move in Charlie and Heather's circles, so I don't know the details. Wilkins stayed married. I heard that his wife had found herself a boyfriend, or at least that's what the gossip magazines claimed. I knew for sure that the Wilkins board of directors quickly sent him away. He had become an embarrassing leader. They gave him a huge payout, and Charlie Wilkins joined the ranks of the wealthy without any real job. I had mixed feelings. His career was destroyed, and I was responsible for that. But he still had enough money to afford trips to Paris. Heather started calling me early on Tuesday. She must have tried to reach me all day Monday, but my phone was broken then. I knew I had to talk to her eventually, so I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. I said, "Tommy Meisner, how may I help you?" She was very angry. She said, "Where have you been? I called all day yesterday and you didn't answer your phone." I replied casually, "So, how was Paris? You looked great in the pictures." She yelled, "Where are you? Where are your things? Why aren't you home?" I laughed and said, "What part of I won't be there when you get back? Didn't you understand?" There was a long silence. She said, a bit quieter, "I didn't think you meant it. There's no way you would just walk away from 22 years of happy marriage." I chuckled and said, "Oh, but I have, Heather, and I have a brand new life now. Better yet, it's completely without you." There was an even longer pause. She then spoke in a softer tone, "But I can't live without you. You know that." She might not have realized just how true that was. I had left what little money we had in our savings and checking accounts after I paid for my move, but that money would run out in a couple of weeks, and she had nothing to replace it. I spoke firmly. "You'll have to get used to it, Heather. I am completely out of your life. Now I really need to get back to work." She pleaded, "Wait, don't hang up. I really need to talk to you." Her voice was desperate now. I wanted to end this quickly. I said, "Let's meet at Johnny's and we can work out the separation details." She said hopefully, "Can't you come here? I can make dinner." I said sternly, "I am never going into that house again, especially with you in it." She hesitated. "Okay, Johnny's, what time?" I said, 7 o'clock. That would give me time to prepare for what was coming. Heather didn't disappoint. All conversations stopped when she walked in the door. Johnny's is a local place, and seeing someone like her appear had everyone staring. She was indeed striking. She wore a tight little black dress that showed off her long legs and ended 4 inches above her knees. She has a cute face, but it's not extraordinary. Yet, with all the beauty tricks she had learned over the past year, she could look like a movie star, and her full, curvy body only added to her allure. When she lost her baby fat, she discovered she had a slim, long waist that made her shapely body stand out even more. Hate isn't the opposite of love. Hate means you still have feelings for the other person. The opposite of love is total indifference. That's what I felt as she came to the table. She had shown me nothing but disrespect. Her snooty attitude before going on her trip ended any leftover feelings I might have had. Now, I just wanted to get this over with. She tried to sit next to me in the booth. I said, "Heather, we can't talk sitting side by side and we have serious issues to resolve." She gave me a look that said I was missing out, but then sat across from me. She clearly thought she still had the upper hand. To be polite, I asked, "How are you?" She was about to tell me about her trip. I could see it in her eyes, but something in my eyes must have changed her mind. Instead, she said, trying to reason with me, "Stop pouting and come home to me. I told you, you won't regret it. I will work hard to make it up to you." Still not getting it. I had known Heather through good times and bad, through daily routines and more exciting moments. I had loved her for 22 years without any doubt. Now I had nothing left. She had shattered all my beliefs. I thought she loved me and our marriage. But what I got was a woman who thought her looks could fix everything. I said, "You need to accept that I'm never coming back. We need to sort out the separation terms." She looked doubtful and said, "That's ridiculous. We might have had a fight, but that's behind us now. I am yours. Only yours. Forever." Who was this person? I couldn't hide my surprise as I said, "You call having an affair a fight? That was a planned and blatant betrayal. The Heather I knew was loving and kind. She would never do something like that." I looked at her seriously and said in the calmest tone, "As far as I'm concerned, the Heather I married doesn't exist anymore. You replaced her with someone selfish, vain, and manipulative." Her face showed shock and disbelief. She seemed genuinely confused. We were supposed to live happily ever after, right? That's what happens in fairy tales. She said, "Look at me. I'm the same person you married, just better. Didn't you like the new body I made for you?" I replied, "I did until you shared it with someone else. You slept with Wilkins last week, didn't you?" She was about to say it didn't matter, that it was just physical, and she only loved me. But sanity seemed to catch up with her. She just stared at me, ashamed and guilty. I said tiredly, "It really doesn't matter. You can be with anyone you want now. I have no hold on you. We just need to settle things, then we can go our separate ways." She looked shocked. It was like she finally realized I was serious. She said with real emotion, "I was loyal to you for 22 years. I will be for the rest of our lives. We have 2 wonderful kids. How does 1 week change that? Amazing! Not a single word of apology or regret. Heather, I hardly knew you." Now it was my turn to be sarcastic. I said, "Really? You were with another man for a whole week and you thought I'd just forget it?" The conversation was becoming pointless. She didn't get it. I said, "Look, Heather, I really have to go. You will need money to live on. So here's how it will go. Jim Edgerton will give you the best separation agreement we can come up with. I owe it to you for the first 22 years. I added, "It's all in the agreement. We share everything equally. The kids might need loans to finish school, and you will have to cut down on your spending, but you should manage with what I'm giving you until you get a job." Sadly, that doesn't include health club fees. I checked to make sure she was paying attention. I said, "More importantly, we have to sell the house and split the money. Neither of us can afford to live there anymore. Luckily, we have a lot of equity, so we can sell it at a low price, and I already have an offer that will keep us both out of bankruptcy court." It was beginning to hit her. You could see it. First confusion, then panic. She looked like she was about to cry and said, "This can't be happening. How can you leave me after so many happy years? What am I going to do?" I said, "You are a beautiful woman, Heather. I'll get you the quickest divorce possible. You will have your pick of men, and I know it won't be long before you find your next partner." She pulled herself together and said, "You make it sound like a business deal. I give a man my body and he takes care of me. Is that what you are suggesting? That sounds like prostitution." I said, "Well, haven't you already done that? What was Paris, after all? You might call it romance, but I call it a sale, so if the shoe fits, wear it." I stood up. She stood with me. She looked at me with longing and said, "Come home, Tommy. I miss our happy life together." That sounded more like the Heather I used to know. I almost gave in, but I remembered what she had become, so instead I said, "You'll get the papers tomorrow." And I walked out of her life. In the land of Nod, the divorce was as calm as a stormy sea. No one died, but Heather's lawyer tried his best to attack me in court. Heather finally realized her easy life was over and was desperate to get as much as she could. On my side, my friend Jim was a very good lawyer, and my offer was generous given the highly publicized trip to Paris. I felt nothing for Heather. I just wanted her out of my life. I once loved her, but the person she had become meant nothing to me. We were in a no-fault state, but judges have some freedom. The judge handling our case seemed to dislike Wilkins, maybe as much as I did. So every decision went in my favor. Heather got exactly what I had originally offered. Since we sold the house, things were simpler and it probably kept us out of bankruptcy. From our 22 years together, we got something. The equity paid off all our unsecured debts and left us each with $30,000. I figured that would last Heather about 3 months at her current spending rate. Then she would have to face reality like the rest of us. Tommy Jr. and Susie were in college. Tommy was in his senior year and Susie was a junior. They were supported by our college savings trust, so the $30K from the house and some federal grants would cover their education. Heather got to them first and told her side of the story. They weren't happy with me, but they were good kids, and I knew they would eventually understand. We went our separate ways after the ruling, not without a small pain in my heart. I felt a natural sense of loss, thinking about what used to be and would never be again. Heather and I had been very close once. However, I wasn't going to spend any more time trying to figure out why my life had changed so much. It was clear to me. We all fight against time. I get older, and I feel life slipping by. Heather's fears about aging had crushed her better nature, and this led to our downfall. I knew Heather well. I believed she would have stuck around if Wilkins hadn't pulled her away. Anyone who was once shy might find it hard to say no to a guy like him. He was rich, tan, and charming compared to me, middle-aged, pale, and nerdy. So I blamed Charlie Wilkins for a lot. Heather's other justifications were just excuses. Heather had turned herself into someone attractive to men without morals. The fact that she easily gave in told me enough about her and the state of our marriage. So I walked away without blame. But loneliness is a sneaky feeling. Heather got married as soon as the divorce was final. I knew it would happen. She needed to support herself somehow. Her new husband was 65, 23 years older than her. She was 42, 2 years younger than me. Old Bud, her new husband, was like Charlie Wilkins. Maybe Heather had issues with older men. And with Viagra around, he could certainly help her out. Her new husband was involved in local politics and had our district's seat in Congress. He was also a friend of Wilkins. The gossip around town was that old Bud was involved in political corruption. Heather probably didn't care. She had her rich husband and was often in the news, standing by his side, looking like a trophy wife. I almost threw up. It wasn't because I still had feelings for Heather. It was just a harsh example of pride and ego. My only comfort was seeing her forced smile and desperate eyes during TV interviews. It was like looking at a scared pet. It made me think there might be trouble in their so-called paradise. Heather had chosen her life, and it felt good to think she had to live with her choice. Maybe Wilkins and her husband were sharing her, or perhaps her husband was using her to gain favor. Maybe she even regretted her choices. Thinking about that was oddly satisfying. She had tried to reach out a few times just to see if we could still be friends. I ignored her calls like spam, but seeing her stressed face on the news made me wonder if she thought we could get back together. Like I said, she had been out of touch with reality for a while. Heather's marriage freed me from paying her money. I also had no trouble finding a social life. A 44-year-old guy, decent-looking and single, has a good chance with women his age. Most men my age are busy with younger women. So I could pick from beautiful, elegant women my age. But my long-term plans were blown apart, and I felt lost. Life is supposed to follow a certain path. You study hard, find the love of your life, get a good job, work hard, have kids, and grow old together. Now, all I had left was my job. I met Heather Smith in my senior year at Michigan. I was on the swim team while studying computer engineering. Computer engineering isn't an easy major, and swimming took up a lot of my time, leaving me with little time to socialize. Heather was on the women's team, so we saw each other a lot. This was before modern swim brands took over, and our suits clung to our bodies. If you were a guy, you pulled on the front of your suit when you got out of the water, or everyone would see what you had. Women had the same problem with their bathing suits. So, when we trained with the women's team, we either stayed in the water or kept our sweats on. Walking around with an embarrassment could be very awkward. I was hanging on a lane marker when Heather stepped up on the diving blocks. I hadn't seen her before, but she blew me away. She was of medium height, a bit thick, with big curves. Her face wasn't stunning, but her smile was like sunshine. I was drawn to her. She was also very fast, which caught the attention of the university's publicity team, and they wanted a picture of us together for the program cover. That's how we started talking. The rest is history. I asked her for coffee, which led to a date, which led to more. The first time we were together was in my dorm room. My college roommate was out for the weekend, so I sneaked a girl past the coach who sometimes checked the halls. She was dressed in what people called grunge style back then. College guys liked this look because the loose clothes were easy to take off. I already knew her body well. Back then, female swimmers couldn't hide much because of their tight swimsuits. The only thing I didn't know about Heather was the color of her areolas. They turned out to be large and light brown. She was lying on my narrow dorm bed, completely naked, breathing heavily and looking scared. I wasn't feeling much more confident. I was very new to all this. We kissed, and she started to make soft sounds. I was trying not to finish too soon. It was a race to see who would finish first. She was making a lot of noise, and I was glad the walls were solid. There was a moment when I thought I might lose myself completely. We lay there, breathing heavily. Both of us were very fit, yet we had exhausted each other. She looked at me and said, "I've been with a few men, but never like that." I felt a bit jealous, but she looked at me lovingly and said, "I want to do this over and over. I could get used to this." After that, we were always together. I finished my degree and got a master's in engineering while she finished her education degree. She moved in with me off campus. We were never apart, except when she traveled for swim meets. We got married when she graduated and moved to Chicago. I got a job with a big accounting firm quickly. We bought a small house, and I took the train to work every day. Heather taught at a local school. We had a happy life together until our first child, Tom Jr., came along. Heather became a full-time mom, and money was tight, but we managed. Heather was an amazing mom, and I was proud of her. She was thinking about going back to work when our daughter, Susie, arrived. She was a surprise, but we loved her, and Heather stayed home to take care of her. By the time Susie was ready for school, I had a good job, and we didn't need Heather to work. She was devoted to our family, and life was good. The kids grew up, and we moved a few times, eventually settling in a small town in Virginia, south of the Beltway. It was a perfect place for me, close to both D.C. and Richmond. I could drive into Richmond in less than an hour. The 45-minute drive up I-95 to the Springfield Metro stop was pretty easy compared to driving through all the traffic in D.C. We finally had our own time, just Heather and me. I thought life was perfect until Wilkins messed it up. I'm not trying to make excuses for Heather. She spent almost 21 years as a stay-at-home mom without complaining, but during that time she changed from a fit athlete to an out-of-shape housewife. Meanwhile, I was getting more successful, but maybe I wasn't around enough. It was a bad mix. There must have been a lot of anger building up in her. Her betrayal hit me out of nowhere and was hard to take. Whatever caused it, my life felt like it ended long before the growing old together part. That made me feel empty, like I had wasted my time on Earth. I knew it was childish to think that way, but I couldn't shake it off. I was almost 46 years old. I had a great job as a junior partner and head of cybersecurity in Richmond. I had plenty of money since Heather was no longer depending on me. More importantly, I didn't have to hang out in bars to meet women. They were interested in me on their own, but I didn't trust any of them, so I was alone and had no idea what to do next. A year after the divorce, I bought a small place by Capitol Bay on the Rappahannock River. It was just a tiny one-room house with a tin roof, but it was peaceful by the river. I enjoyed the nature and wildlife there for hours. I had a solo kayak that I paddled around to take pictures of plants and animals, just enjoying the summer. It was always warm at night, and my air conditioner wasn't working well, so I grabbed my kayak and paddled out into the dusk with the sounds of bullfrogs and insects. I let the current carry me south toward the Downing Bridge. I had 3 bottles of beer in the cooler on my kayak. I put my feet up, lay back, and looked at the stars. With a full moon overhead, I began to understand my problem. For once, I was drifting physically, not emotionally. Maybe that was why I suddenly figured it out. March or die! It sounded dramatic, but I wanted my self-respect back. I knew I had to stop being weak and take a chance. It was scary for a 45-year-old to leave a comfortable life and start fresh. Middle-aged men lack the energy and innocence of youth. But the other choice was to wander without a plan, which seemed cowardly. I had drifted almost a mile, and it was getting near midnight. The stars were bright, and the moon was glowing. I heard cicadas on the riverbank, and the details of my plan came together. It would start on Monday. Paddling back was harder than floating down. But I was in good shape, and by 2 a.m., I dragged my kayak back to shore. I got into my Land Rover and drove back to the trailer park. I still laugh when I say that. I got a couple of hours of sleep, put on my business suit, and headed for our main office in D.C. I needed to talk to the managing partner. All the way back up the river, I planned how to reset my life. Clearly, my old way of living hadn't worked. The American dream can suck your soul. You follow outdated rules, keep the family happy, and please your boss. All of those things serve others. So what if you only please yourself? Your wife cheats, your kids think you're a jerk, and your friends leave you. Oh, right, that's what happened anyway. I followed the rules for 22 years. The wife cheated, my kids think I'm a jerk, and I have no friends. Even work, where I was happy and successful, started to feel like a dead end. Plus, I already lived in a trailer. It was just in the wrong place. Last night's realization hit me hard, like a sudden insight. So I was going to change everything. Basically, I planned to go wild, and I wanted to talk to the managing partner about it. Our main office is on New York Avenue between 11th and 12th. Being close to K Street is no accident. The building looks rich and successful, which attracts important clients. The managing partner's office is huge and fancy, like the Taj Mahal. As a junior partner, I could get a meeting, but it was clear he had no idea who I was. I thought I would hear Purcell's trumpet voluntary as I walked the 50 feet from the door to his desk. The partner stood up and shook my hand. He pointed to a chair and said, "What can I do for you?" Thomas? No one but my mom ever called me Thomas. I had planned this carefully. I wanted to suggest doing live penetration tests in the wild. We already did pen tests, but they were safe and didn't show much. My idea was the rough, no-holds-barred attack on a system. It would ensure the client was really secure. The managing partner looked shocked. Of course. He stammered, "That's crazy. What if we actually damage or crash one of their systems?" I replied, "Wouldn't they rather find out from us than get hacked by someone else, like the Chinese or North Koreans? And we could fix it quickly since we broke it." He paused and seemed interested. I added eagerly, "Yes, it could be destructive, and we don't want our firm's name tied to a secret attack, even if it's for a good reason." He nodded in agreement. "Good," I continued. "I propose to separate myself from the firm completely. I'll work far away from you. I'll run all operations as if they weren't part of the firm. Of course, you would still pay me, but through a different company to give you believable deniability." He still looked doubtful, so I added, "We won't have many clients, but a few brave ones will want to try. That would cover my pay. If you don't agree, I'll leave and you'll lose a valuable part of the business. I know I can sell this, so I'm willing to take the risk." He leaned back, put his fingers together, and looked thoughtful. Then he said, "All right. You convinced me. I'll talk to the other senior partners. I'll let you know tomorrow." I stood up and thanked him. We shook hands, and I walked out into my new life. I called the managing partner the next day. He said, "Thomas, we had a long discussion last night, and most of the board thought your idea was bold and enterprising, so we will support you. We need the details of your plan. Send them to Art Reynolds as soon as possible and keep me informed. Good luck." Art was the managing partner's personal go-to guy. If he was involved, they were more interested in my idea than they showed. I had saved a good amount of money since my divorce. The trailer I owned wasn't worth much, but it was paid off, so I sold it for a bit more money. I bought my river shack with cash. It was so cheap I wasn't even sure if the guy who sold it to me really owned it, so I could leave it without looking back. When I hit the road, I had a healthy amount of money with me. All my belongings fit in my Land Rover LR4. I wanted to get far from my old life and to a warm place. I thought about California and the Southwest, but California is pricey, and I can't stand old folks and snakes, so Arizona and New Mexico were out. Texas is either about oil or cowboys, and the Deep South is still stuck in the past. So I headed down I-95 to the Florida Keys. I planned to set up shop in Key West. I'd heard good things about the place, and I don't mean the weather. Okay, I admit, the place has a lot of gay people. But the relaxed and party vibe for a straight single guy like me was a big draw, and it is tropical. On the way, I stopped for breakfast in Key Largo. It's touristy, but it attracts fishermen and divers, not just partygoers pretending to be Hemingway. The working-class feel of the diner appealed to me. I thought, this is exactly what I'm looking for, far from my old life. Feels like a place where I can make a new start. As I was leaving, I saw a local ad board. A place was for sale that looked interesting. I drove up US 1 and checked it out. Like the other homes there, it started off mobile. But it was a lot nicer than my old trailer, and it was cheap. I wrote a check to the real estate folks, and they happily handed me a key. Inside, I was thrilled to see it came furnished. While it wasn't palace quality, it had stainless steel and leather fittings. The floor was a convincing wood laminate. It had a deck with a view of the canal and even a little boat slip. The neighborhood had people working the docks or in tourism. My neighbors had babies, and distant crying didn't bother me. There were some older folks on Social Security and a few living off government help or family support. None of my neighbors here were like the stuck-up, well-off folks I'd lived with for over 2 decades. I was going to settle down right here. The fishermen around probably cared about easy water access. I, on the other hand, cared about fast internet, as it was my new line of work. Luckily, the main internet cable for the area ran close by, only about 300 yards away. By the end of the first week, I had my place set up with T1 internet. I wanted to fit into my new community, so I started frequenting a few local bars. My Land Rover LR4 stood out. It looked tough, like the old Land Rover Defenders, not like the fancy models. The locals, who mostly drove beat-up F-150S, didn't know what to make of it, but its rugged look sent the right message. Soon, I was being seen more as a resident, not just a visitor. The Keys are special when you live there. The air is thick with tropical humidity and the sun feels more like Cuba than Orlando. Mornings have a bright blue sky that turns cloudy as the day heats up. There's always traffic on US 1, even at night. As you get closer to the highway, the smell changes from tropical plants and sea breeze to exhaust and diesel. It had been 2.5 years since that terrible trip to Paris, and I was starting to feel more at home. I don't know how others deal with big betrayals, but I had become like an island fortress, cut off from my feelings and hiding behind anger. It wasn't the kind of anger that leads to fights, but more like a heavy cloud of distrust. It made people stay away, which was just what I wanted. I felt empty inside, no anger, no longing for lost love. I knew it was a defense to protect myself, and I wasn't going to change. I decided never to trust anyone but myself again. Well, there was one exception. I got a dog. Dogs, I believe, are the only creatures a man can fully trust. Mine was a big, wrinkly mix of Labrador and Shar-Pei, smelly but full of unconditional love and kindness. He was the best companion anyone could ask for. We talked all the time. Well, I talked and he listened. He was a great listener. I told him all about my feelings of hopelessness. He would tilt his head and perk his battle-scarred ears as if to say, "I understand, boss. I've been mistreated too." That dog helped me heal more than any psychologist could for just a few bowls of dog food a day. I was starting to feel better about myself. My business idea had grown much bigger than I ever thought it would. That was a big boost to my shattered confidence. The firm had found lots of customers for me. This was all done through word of mouth since they had to keep me separate from their regular business. But both of us were making a lot of money. All my clients wanted a tough, secure experience. Most of them were military people who had a lot to lose if they got hacked. But some businesses also wanted strong protection. I gave them my usual warning about what could happen once I started my work, and they still wanted my extreme services. My methods were harsh and risky, but it was the only way to ensure they could rest easy in the digital age. I searched the dark web, a very creepy place for people who could do serious hacking. It wasn't easy because the real experts are hidden and anonymous. Many of them were like villains from James Bond movies, minus the white Persian cat. But they were anarchists with no real political goals, so they were easy to hire if you paid them well. I paid them in bitcoins to stay anonymous. No one in their right mind would deal with these guys openly. They all thought highly of themselves and lacked any conscience. If that makes them sociopaths, so be it. I was at the top of the game and needed the best. They put people in jail for sabotaging government systems, which is what I was doing. My employer didn't know about it. I kept each hacker in the dark about the big picture to avoid any large-scale damage. Trusting a sociopath to do the right thing would be foolish. My business went smoothly for 1.5 years, and I made millions. I had to stay on top of every job to ensure no one crossed any lines. But it was just work, except for one case. I'm not a vindictive person. Oh, wait, did I just say that? I mean, I'm a very vindictive person, so I delightfully set my sights on Charlie Wilkins and my ex-wife. That was very personal. The thought of Wilkins enjoying retirement with a golden parachute made me angry. So I handed him over to a Chinese hacker group. They emptied his accounts and donated the money to a Chechen charity just as I instructed. No need to thank me, and good luck getting that back. They also revealed that my ex-wife's new husband was a corrupt man who treated women badly. This news spread quickly on the internet. It was clear he would have to quit his job. He and Heather lost a lot of money and didn't see it coming. These days, to protect your stuff, it's better to keep it hidden and not online. I was thrilled. I thought, poor Heather, she sure knows how to pick 'em. I wondered if she ever figured it out. One hot and sticky night, everything changed. Buster and I were sitting outside at my favorite spot. He was staring into space, feeling happy. I was also staring into space, thinking about my life. I had changed a lot. During my marriage, I dressed like a preppy from Orvis, never wearing the same clothes twice. Now I lived in worn-out boat shorts and an old, colorful shirt. Sometimes I even skipped the underwear. I had a fishing cap that was faded and stained. That was my whole wardrobe, perfect for the climate in the Keys. When I needed a new shirt, I just bought a cheap one from a tourist shop and threw the old one away. It was better than going to the laundromat. While I sat there, a small figure in jean shorts and a hoodie came up to me. The sudden appearance made me jump. The person said, "Hey, mister," in a very high-pitched voice. I thought it was a young boy, maybe younger than I first thought. He was small, about 5 feet tall and 100 pounds. I figured he was just a local teenager asking for some spare change. Then he pulled back the hoodie, and I saw he was actually a she. I guess you would call her a hippie if they still exist. She had thick auburn hair cut short, and she didn't wear any makeup. She didn't need it because her face was almost glowing, with eyelashes that seemed fake because they were so long and thick. But her eyes were the most interesting thing about her. They were a bright green and very big, almost like a cartoon. Her nose was perfect, and her mouth was a small, sarcastic smile. She was built like a 12-year-old. I said, "Does your mother know you're out here?" She laughed and said, "I haven't lived with my mother in 10 years. I left when I was 18, and I am never going back." I laughed too and said, "Really? Seriously? You don't look older than 14, so stop joking around or I'll turn you over my knee." She laughed again and said, "Oh, really? Aren't you Thomas Miller Meisner from 1539 Greenbrier Lane with kids named Thomas Jr. and Susan at Marquette University and an ex-wife named Heather Whitaker who's in bankruptcy court right now?" I looked into her eyes. They were no longer soft green jade. They were emerald hard. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to stay calm as I said, "How did you find me?" She might look young, but this girl could ruin anyone's life. She changed back to a cheerful teenager and said, "I'm the one who hacked your ex-wife and her friends. It wasn't hard to figure out." I couldn't believe it. I said, "But I hired the Red Dragon Revolution for that?" She laughed and said, "Yep, that's me." I was stunned. "You're the Red Dragon Revolution, but I thought they were Chinese." She laughed again. "Pretty good cover, huh?" I sat there with my mouth open, staring at her. This small girl could do more damage than a bunch of angry bikers. I said, "But the RDR has done some serious stuff over the years." She said, "Thank you." I was starting to feel uneasy. "Aren't they one of those groups that the mafia and other gangs use?" She smiled. "Sometimes." "Great, she's connected to them too," I said, "but the RDR controls the biggest zombie botnet?" She said, "I don't know if it's the biggest, but it works for me." I was overwhelmed. Didn't the RDR create the IPv4 worm that shut down the internet? She nodded. "Only in some countries." Yikes, I had to ask. "So what are you doing here?" She said, "I came to warn you. I've looked into your life and you seem like a decent guy for a pseudo." "I'm sorry for what your ex-wife did to you. I made sure she paid for it." She was smiling in a way that was scary. I'm not a brave man. I wanted to run back to my trailer and hide. But I knew I had to keep talking to her. I said, "You wanted to warn me about what?" I didn't think I would like her answer, but she knew everything. And the Red Dragon was a hacker legend. So what she had to say was important. She actually looked a bit sympathetic. Up to that point, she had been watching me like a predator, and the fact that she still seemed more like a lost girl than a dangerous woman didn't matter anymore. The best of them are born with their skills and they show up very early. She said, "I'm worried that your success has been a bit too much. You've taken a lot of money from some very bad people, so now there's a price on your head. You need to go away." I believed her without thinking. Success makes you noticeable. I knew what happens when hackers target you personally. Your secrets become public, you lose your money, your credit score gets ruined, and the police come after you. I was sure someone would take the chance to collect that bounty. So I asked, "How can I trust you not to collect that bounty?" She laughed loudly and said, "I could have exposed you a long time ago. What do I need money for? I take whatever I want. My flight here and the rental car were paid for by a guy you pointed my way named Wilkins." I was so shocked that I said, "You mean you didn't give his money to the Chechnyans?" "That didn't matter." "I know. I'm stupid." she said, still amused. What does that have to do with anything? You have about 72 hours to disappear or bad things will start happening to you and everyone you know. I'm here to help you disappear. Then she stopped and said playfully, So let's go back to your place. I almost thought she sounded flirty, but I was old enough to be her father. My daughter Susie was only 7 years younger than this new friend. Besides, she might be 28, but still looked very young. I knew what was going to happen. She needed to use my equipment to make me disappear. I was going to become a new person. It felt like the universe was pulling the rug out from under me again, just like 4 years ago. Suddenly, my peaceful life as Tommy Meisner ended quickly. I was still catching up with what that meant. I had been happy for the first time in a long time, and then it was all gone in an instant. If I were still married, disappearing would have been unbearable, but now it wasn't as big a deal. Still, feelings of nostalgia and regret hit me hard. The kids would think I was dead. I would never see them again. My employer of almost 25 years would be left holding the bag. My career, which had been my whole life up to that point, was over. The feelings of loss were beyond words. I got up and called Buster. He stood up and gave me a look like, "Who's she, boss?" I started to cross US 1 heading for my trailer. She walked happily next to me. She didn't even reach my shoulder, and Buster probably weighed more than she did. I said, "Not to sound ungrateful, but why should I believe you?" She said, "No offense taken. I'll show you when we get to 17 Poinciana Drive." I said, "Okay, enough. I get it." Then I muttered, "Show off." She wasn't lying. We work in codes, not the point and click interfaces most people use. She did a little typing and it was clear. Several groups wanted my head for what I did. They put the word out on the dark web. I felt flattered by the number of bitcoins they offered. But I had cost them a lot of dirty money. I just never thought they'd get this extreme. I guessed it was organized crime, not just the hacker community. My identity was still hidden. But she told me someone would figure it out in a couple of days. She said with respect, "You're pretty good for an amateur, but not good enough to stay hidden from someone like me. So, do you want me to help you or not?" It was like she was asking if I wanted chocolate or vanilla ice cream. I was holding a gun to my own head. I knew I had to do it, but couldn't make myself pull the trigger. Tommy Meisner would be no more, and I still had questions. I said, "I have saved a lot of money. Will it come with me?" She laughed and said, "Of course, but you won't need money as long as I'm with you." I asked, confused, "Are you coming with me?" She said, "For a while, you need looking after. Once you're on your feet, we'll see where we go from there. I don't have a dad or mom, so maybe you can be my daddy." She said that with a sly smile. Well, I didn't have kids now either, though my life insurance would provide for Tommy and Susie for a long time. I could watch them from the internet. I would never hold the grandkids, but at least I would know about their lives. Ironically, I could follow them on Facebook. It was very sad and unfair, but I had known all along I was dealing with dangerous things. I said, "How long will this take?" She looked at me like I was an idiot. She said, "Please, I've been setting up backdoors for years. We can leave tomorrow. What are you going to do with this?" She pointed to the trailer. I said, "Can you give it to my kids?" She said, "Sure." I said firmly, "I need to take Buster with me." She looked doubtful but said, "All right, I can get him a service dog certification. What disability should I put you down for?" I said, "How about terminal stupidity?" Then I added, "I don't even know your name." She said casually, "You can call me Ariadne." I understood. In Greek mythology, Ariadne was a princess who helped Theseus escape the Minotaur, only for Theseus to leave her behind. I hoped my new friend wasn't being sarcastic. I thought, I wonder what her real name is. Early the next morning, James Robert Newhouse and his daughter Ariadne packed his things and drove up US 1. Why would I do something as crazy as disappearing? It was an easy choice. I knew who I was dealing with. Our society depends too much on computers, and some bad people at the top make lots of money from this, and they do it illegally. Anyone who messes with their money can expect trouble. I thought my small operation would go unnoticed, as it was just my plan to start fresh after my divorce. But it had worked too well. The internet is like the Wild West. The person with the most skills makes the rules. There are no real police, and the talented hackers never get caught. They are like wolves, and the rest of us are like sheep. The only reason a sheep hasn't been eaten is because the wolves haven't caught up to it yet. Well, they had caught up to me now. That's why I was driving up US 1 with my new daughter. Things like passports and credit cards take a few days to get. So we needed a place to stay. Luckily, Ariadne was very skilled at hiding. I still knew nothing about her, but I did know she was very smart. She probably had 10 fake identities ready, and that helped while we waited for my new identity. We decided the US mainland was too obvious a place to find me. So as soon as my things arrived, we planned to take the first cruise out of Miami. You might ask, why a cruise? Can you think of a better way to disappear? You get on a big ship with thousands of happy people. Then you can easily blend in at every port. It's simple to get lost in such a big crowd. Ariadne got us a suite at the Fontainebleau. It was a clever move. If people are looking for you, you'd usually hide in a small, cheap motel, right? But people who have nothing to hide go to the fanciest places. The suite cost $800 per night, but I was sure someone else was paying for it. Ariadne had lots of American Express black cards to use. There was a bit of trouble at the front desk. The staff didn't expect a big dog like Buster to be a service dog, but they had no choice when they saw his documents. I needed my big, intimidating dog because I was disabled. The other awkward moment was when we got to our room. It was the biggest suite, but there was only one bed. I wasn't going to sleep with my daughter. Ariadne laughed and said, "Look at this couch. It's wider and nicer than most beds. I'm small. I can sleep here easily." I had a bag with almost all my stuff. Ariadne laughed and said, "You need to spend today shopping, Dad. I do too." She winked and said, "You can't look like some regular guy from Cleveland. You need to look the part when you use the money in your Cayman accounts. Let's meet back here in a few hours. I want to see a whole new you." I had become totally dependent on Ariadne, so I did what she told me to do. It wasn't that I was scared of her. It was just that Ariadne knew this world, and I was new to it. So I couldn't ignore her advice. I spent the whole afternoon creating the new me. I spent $45,000 at Ida and Harry's and Bloy's Signature. I imagined that the guy I was pretending to be had grown up rich. So I did the full Ralph Lauren preppy look. Elite, understated, elegant, with a touch of snob. It was tricky to pay for everything, but I charged it all to the room. They quickly found out my purchases were backed by an Amex Black. So a porter and I took everything back to the suite on 2 baggage carts. Ariadne was already in the room, standing on the balcony and looking at the ocean. I saw that part of the closet was filled with her new clothes. There were a couple of half-packed leather bags on the floor. Since those matched the ones I had just bought, I knew we had spent $8,000 on luggage alone. She surprised me when she came back inside from the balcony. When I had left, she looked like a homeless girl in a black hoodie. Now she was a completely different person. Her thick auburn hair was styled in a way that highlighted her beautiful face and striking green eyes. She had also put on makeup and looked like she graduated from a top college. More importantly, she clearly didn't look like a 14-year-old. She was small, which made her look young. But I knew from her clothes that she had long, well-shaped legs. Now, in a modest dress, it was clear she had a fit and well-proportioned body. She smiled and did a little spin. She asked, "You like?" I said with amazement. "My God, Ariadne! You're beautiful!" She turned bright red and said, "You don't have to flatter me. I'm going to take good care of you anyway." Her statement seemed unclear. I quickly said, "No, I really mean it. You are beautiful." It was true. By any measure, she was a stunning woman. Her eyes softened, like when girls get emotional, and she walked over in high heels that made her long legs flex. She gave me a gentle kiss on the cheek, looked at me with a cheeky smile, and said, "Thank you, Daddy." Where did she get that amazing perfume? We ate dim sum and Cantonese lobster at Hakkasan. She was so perfect and lovely that she turned heads when we sat down. Half the room thought she was my girlfriend and disapproved. The other half thought I was a caring dad taking his daughter to dinner. I said, "Maybe you should order for us since you're Chinese." She grinned and replied, "I'm just the red dragon when I work. My ancestors are Scotch-Irish." That explained her dark auburn hair and green eyes. She was acting like we were a loving family. She did those caring woman things, like adjusting my tie and picking lint off my jacket. But I didn't forget she was perhaps the most dangerous person in Miami, including all the local snakes and alligators. It felt like being hugged by a giant python from the Everglades. I didn't know whether to be happy or scared. We sipped some really good plum wine after dinner. I asked, "So, what's the plan now, Commander?" She said, "It's Tuesday. All your paperwork will arrive in a few days. I booked us on a Friday morning trip. It's on one of those big celebrity ships. We'll blend in. It's a 4-day trip from Puerto Rico to the Eastern Caribbean, ending at St. Lucia. I want to get off there. I've been to St. Lucia, and it's very nice." I asked, "What about you?" She looked confused and said, "I'm going with you. Why do you ask?" I sighed and said, "I really want you to come with me. I know it's crazy since both of us have lived alone and all I know about you is that you are the red dragon. But I feel I can trust you. I think you're a good person and you care about me." I didn't add, "Even though you're a well-known cyber criminal." I went on, "The longer we're together, the stronger that feeling gets. I'm confused where it's leading me. I'm starting to see you as a woman, not my daughter. And after the disaster that happened the last time I got close to a woman, I don't want to repeat." She looked at me with an intimacy I'd never experienced. She was only 28, but the red dragon was wise beyond her years. She took my hand and said, "For now, think of me as your guardian angel. We still have to put a lot of distance between Tommy Meisner and Jim Newhouse. We can talk after that." She sat back with a smile and said, "I will be your loving daughter this whole time, and I will keep you safe. You haven't heard my story yet and might change your mind about me after I tell it. Then we can decide what comes next." She gazed into my eyes and added, "I won't ever leave you unless you send me away." Her eyes were shining with tears, and she looked absolutely stunning. Things were a bit awkward when we got back to the room. We both knew the father-daughter thing was just a cover. I also knew I was about to sleep in the same place with a beautiful woman. The last thing I wanted was to get into a mess with a woman, especially one as dangerous as Ariadne. But there was still a feeling of physical attraction. This would be very weird if we were actually related. She went into the bathroom. I heard her brushing her teeth, and she came out wearing pale yellow, modest pajamas made of silky material. She had worked all night changing my records, so I had never seen her in sleepwear. She shyly said, "I usually sleep naked, but that wouldn't work here." She wasn't trying to be sexual at all. The last thing both of us wanted was that. But I couldn't help noticing her fit, petite body. Small women don't need big features to look attractive. Ariadne had an hourglass shape, with perfect curves and a shapely figure. She probably weighed about 100 pounds. I tried not to stare, but I noticed her figure. I gulped and said, "I'll see you in a minute." Then I went into the bathroom. I came out wearing maroon silk pajamas from I Love Lucy. The girl at Ida and Harry's said they were the best in men's sleepwear. I wasn't sure since I usually sleep in boxers. Meanwhile, Ariadne had made her bed in the other room and was getting in. The shape of her body in that tight silk dress made me feel embarrassed, so I quickly got under the blanket and turned off the light. I said, "Good night, honey." I was trying hard not to think of her as anything more than my daughter. She replied, "Good night, Dad," but her voice sounded strained. It made me think she was struggling with similar feelings. I thought, God help me. My new identity card arrived on Thursday afternoon. It was a perfect piece of fake ID. We had been acting like father and daughter for the past 2 days, and we were getting used to the roles. She joked with me a lot, and I looked at her with affection. Thankfully, we didn't feel the strong, confusing feelings we had on the first night. The flight to Puerto Rico took 2.5 hours. The 10-mile taxi ride from the airport to the cruise port felt almost as long. Ariadne stared calmly out the window. She wore a neat white skirt and a blue polo shirt that made her look like a student from a fancy school, not a skilled hacker. Buster, her dog, was wedged between us, panting in the heat and drooling on my new pants. He wore his service dog vest proudly. It made up for his uncomfortable flight in the luggage compartment. He clearly never wanted to experience that again. Ariadne could blend in anywhere, probably why she was so good at crime. She could become anyone she needed to be. We decided that pretending to be a rich single dad with a grown-up daughter was the best cover. I did have a couple of $1 million saved up from my successful work in security testing, but I bet Ariadne could have out-earned me by far. We weren't really spending any money. Ariadne had booked us a luxury suite on a fancy cruise ship. Thankfully, the suite had 2 separate beds, She hacked into the booking system to get it, and no one on the ship knew. Cruise ships are like small towns with a new group of people every week. So when we boarded, it felt like everyone was moving in at the same time. On the first night, we had dinner and watched a show. It was easy to sleep because we each had our own bed. We were starting to feel more like father and daughter. Buster was a bit of a problem since there wasn't much space for him to do his business. But a few extra dollars to our room's butler secured him access to the little garden on the top deck. That's why we chose that ship, and Buster was very happy about it. The cruise itself was quite dull. We didn't want to use the ship's insecure internet connection. Ariadne, who lived online, was especially restless. Neither of us liked partying, but I decided to take her to the ship's nightclub to have some fun. I wore a tuxedo, and she wore a stunning turquoise dress that caught everyone's attention. She quickly became one of the most admired women there. Some guys asked her to dance. She said no at first, but accepted the third guy's offer. He seemed nice enough. She looked at me as if asking for permission, and I said, "Of course, sweetie." She walked to the dance floor and started dancing in a way that seemed very intense to me. I knew it was normal for her generation. Other young people were dancing the same way. The music moved through them and out again, turning into dances that felt strange to me but normal to them. I didn't want to think about Ariadne in a romantic way. Watching her dance helped me see the gap between our ages. Most people live steady lives from start to finish, but not me. I lost the woman I loved overnight and was now on the run from dark forces trying to ruin my new life. I had help from a young, mysterious girl who was one of the most dangerous women around. Even worse, she was stunningly beautiful. Given everything that had happened with women in my past and the fact that my life was in danger, I should have felt nothing but gratitude toward Ariadne. But as I watched her slow dance with that tall, handsome guy, I felt anything but fatherly. She had her arms around his neck and he held her by the waist. They barely touched, but it felt very intimate. Yet she danced no differently than the other young women there. The problem was that the bond between those two was making me feel very jealous. I wanted to be the one holding her, and I wanted to be the one looking into her deep green eyes. I knew it was crazy because I didn't even know her real name, but the feeling was there. Then she made things worse. The music stopped and they laughed as they moved apart. She grabbed his hand and walked over to where I was sitting. I tried not to look too jealous. She said cheerfully, "Frank wants to take me to the mast bar. Can I go, Dad? Please?" I tried to look fatherly as I replied, "Sure, just don't wake me when you come back." "I'll be asleep." She said, "Thanks, Dad." And then she gave my arm a loving squeeze. They walked away together. He was my height, so it looked like he was taking his younger sister somewhere. That is, if you didn't notice the way she moved her hips. I felt even more hopeless and lost than when I watched Heather kiss Wilkins before her trip. I was pretty sure Ariadne would stay out all night with that guy. But I was surprised when I heard them laughing as they came back down the hallway. It had only been an hour and a half. All that time I was lying in the dark, my heart pounding, listening to the sounds of the ship. There was a brief moment at the door with a soft little moan. Then the door opened, and I saw her silhouette as she slipped quietly into the suite. She undressed in the dark and got into her bed. After a few minutes of moving around, she lay still, sleeping peacefully. It was a difficult situation. As the Red Dragon, she might be dangerous to society, but as Ariadne, she was difficult for my heart. I knew I was falling in love with her, and love and trust were things I couldn't afford. Heather had already taken all of that from me. The next morning, I showered and put on khakis and a Ralph Lauren polo shirt. I found Ariadne in the living room reading the newspaper. She was wearing a white linen dress that showed off her figure and legs. Her legs were amazing. I had noticed them back when she used to wear cut-off jeans and a hoodie, but now, in high heels and dressed up, they looked even better. The classy look seemed natural for her. It made me wonder if she came from a wealthy background. She gave me a bright smile and said, "Last night was wonderful. Thank you." I replied jokingly, "I hope you didn't do anything that Daddy wouldn't approve of." She got serious and said, "Don't even think that. We drank and talked and he kissed me at the door, that's it. You need to know that I am devoted to you, only you, and that's important." She looked straight at me, making sure I was listening. She said, "There are cameras all over the public areas of this ship. Every one of them can be hacked. I know because I already did it with my phone. Don't you think it would be strange if someone saw me always choosing to be with my dad instead of boys my age? While she spoke, I was thinking, devoted to me? What does that mean? She added, actually, I want you to find someone tonight, too. We're going to be in St. Lucia in a few days, and we'll get off there. Until then, we need to put on a good show. I asked, so you decided to get off there? She said lightly, yes, my family has a place on the island. We can stay there until they stop looking for you. We need to keep you hidden so well that they think you are gone for good. I said, you've never told me about your family. She replied dismissively, if we continue with this plan, I'll have to tell you. She left it up to me to decide what continue meant. That evening, we were back at the nightclub. I wore a tux, and she wore a short black dress. The dress ended a few inches above her knees, showing off her amazing legs. With the pearls and black pumps, she looked stunning. Her hoodie hadn't shown her curves, and she'd been wearing polo shirts or dresses with high necks since then. This dress had a low neckline, and I noticed her chest looked incredible. They might be smaller than those of a supermodel, but they were perfectly shaped and really caught my eye. Seeing her like that made me feel even more anxious. I've always liked women with nice curves. Heather had an impressive figure, and even when she gained weight, her curves were fun. Now, Ariadne was showing off a perfect shape that made Heather seem less impressive. It felt almost cruel to me. My task for the night was to find a woman my age. I understood why Ariadne wanted me to. To keep up the act of being father and daughter, it made sense. And on a cruise, a dad would probably be looking for some company, too. Ariadne had no trouble meeting men. In fact, they were flocking to our table. She danced with several of them, including her friend from last night. I finally found the courage to approach a table full of women. They seemed either divorced and on a girl's cruise, or married and looking for some fun. Their status didn't matter. My goal was to find one, take her away from the group, and spend time with her. They all watched me eagerly. I'm no Clooney or Grant, but I've learned some social skills since Heather threw me out. There was a short woman with dark hair and a nice figure. Another was a tall redhead who looked like a model. The last was a blonde who seemed like a California beach girl from the 90s. I thought to myself, blonde, brunette, or redhead, such a typical choice. I smiled and asked, would any of you lovely ladies like to dance? The blonde, the nicest looking of the bunch, jumped up and pulled me to the dance floor. She still looked great for her mid-40s and must have been stunning years ago. She wore a lot of gold and gave off the vibe of someone recently divorced and well off. We danced for a while and ended up near Ariadne. She was dancing but facing away from her partner. He couldn't stop staring at her moves. Ariadne saw me and said, "Hi, Dad," while still dancing energetically. My dance partner, moving in a typical older person's way, looked surprised and said, "She's your daughter?" I replied, "For the past 28 years. She looked at Ariadne again and said, "Wow, she looks just like Chelsea Hughes. Her parents were friends of mine in D.C. That coincidence was surprising. I said, "Let's take a break," and led her to a table. The music was still too loud, so I suggested, "Let's get a drink." She seemed to think she might get lucky and got very flirty. We walked to the Globe and Atlas pub arm in arm and sat at a small table for two. My partner was beautiful. She may have lost a bit of her youth, but she still turned heads. She had natural light brown hair, blue eyes, and perfect features. In her tight black dress, she looked impressive. I guessed she was a trophy wife who had been replaced recently. She did all the flirty moves, like crossing and uncrossing her legs and giving a revealing smile. She wanted to speed things up. I didn't want to set a bad example for Ariadne. If I did something, then Ariadne might think it was okay to do the same. And the idea of someone else being with her made me very upset. I kept reminding myself that Ariadne was much younger and well-known online. She was also my guardian, but none of that mattered to my emotional brain. I couldn't shake the desire to be close to her. Meanwhile, the woman across from me knew something I needed to learn. I asked, "You lived in Washington, D.C.? She replied, "Yes, my ex-husband was a vice president at General Dynamics in Falls Church. I live in Georgetown now." I said, "You mentioned that my daughter looked like Chelsea Hughes. Why did that stand out to you? Who is she?" My partner seemed a bit let down. She thought I was about to ask her back to my place. She started looking at another man at the bar but answered my questions anyway. She said, "Chelsea's father is Bill Hughes. He's a big name in security in D.C. I knew Hughes. It's a small world at the top, and we all know each other. I had even worked with him before. She continued, "A few years ago, Hughes invited me and my ex-husband to a picnic concert at Yards Park near the Navy Yard. Hughes and his whole family were there. That's where I met Chelsea." She seemed to recall fond memories as she spoke. Chelsea is one of Hughes's 4 children and the oldest with his second wife. She was such a beautiful girl. Her mother is stunning, and I used to be Miss Teen California, but neither of us could compare to Chelsea at her age. Your daughter looks just like her. I looked closely at the woman across from me. That seemed to encourage her, thinking my interest was something more. She said, "It's funny. Chelsea went to MIT. You'd think she'd go to a women's college like Holyoke or Radcliffe. How could such a pretty girl find a husband among all those geeks?" She laughed. It seemed odd that Chelsea liked nerdy things. Just then, the guy she had been exchanging looks with showed up and said cheerfully, "Can I join you two? You seem to be having fun. I like fun too." Subtle. I said, "Sure," I was about to leave anyway. "I need to check if my daughter is safe at the nightclub." I gave him a look with meaning, but he didn't get it. I turned to my companion and said sincerely, "It was nice meeting you. Hope to see you again." She didn't respond, focused on the guy. I stepped outside and leaned on the ship's rail. The Gulf Stream water was foamy and shiny in the ship's wake. The night was clear and warm, with a big Caribbean moon on the horizon like a bright yellow plate. Meeting her was strange, but not impossible. A woman in the Hughes social circle could be on this pricey and exclusive cruise. Running into someone who knew Chelsea Hughes was a bit more coincidental, but still possible. The woman I talked to was bound to go to the ship's nightclub, so the odds weren't too high. So I had a name. No point doing anything with that info until Ariadne and I stopped pretending to be father and daughter. But it was useful. Ariadne's real dad was a smart guy. Rumor had it her mom was even smarter and stronger. People said she was one of the best-looking women in a city known for its beautiful women. That explained Ariadne's brains and looks. The key thing that convinced me Ariadne was Chelsea was the MIT link. Her dad did the same kind of work Ariadne did, hacking. He was a good guy, but Ariadne's actions weren't always so clear-cut. Any woman who could get into MIT was exceptional at what Ariadne did. So the signs pointed to Chelsea Hughes. I went back to the nightclub to tell Ariadne I was heading to the room. She was dancing closely with the same guy from last night. Her arms were around his neck, head on his chest, pressed up against him. His hands seemed farther down her back, maybe on her hips. This was more than just pretending for our cover story. She was enjoying the moment. But of course she was young, he was handsome, and the cruise ship's atmosphere felt unreal. I felt a sudden silly wave of jealousy. This was getting out of hand. I had no claim on a girl as young as my daughter. She owed me nothing. She had already saved my life. The trouble she was dealing with for me wouldn't kill me but would leave me with nothing. I approached them. The guy smiled nicely. He seemed like a good person. Ariadne said, "Hi, Dad, going back to the room?" I said, "Old people need sleep. You two have fun." Ariadne said pointedly, "I'll be back in an hour." I said, "I might be up, if not, see you in the morning." It hurt to say that. I figured I wouldn't see her until morning. As I left, I saw them kiss. Ariadne was clearly caught up in the moment. My wife of 24 years had gone to Paris and spent a week with another man. Now I was losing a woman to a good-looking, decent guy on a cruise. I felt worse about losing the daughter-like figure than I ever did about losing my wife. So I got a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue on my ship's account. I wasn't paying for it anyway. I sat on the couch drinking my sadness away at $100 a shot. An hour passed. I was almost wondering which side of the balcony to jump from when I heard laughing voices in the hall, right on time. There was a longer pause, and then the door opened. Ariadne came in looking happy, but thankfully still decent. She said lightly, "Pour me some of that?" I poured her a glass and handed it to her. She sat on the couch and rested her head on my shoulder. It was an affectionate gesture, nothing more. She gently touched my cheek. She teased, "Looks like you scored." I joked back, "Not like you did." I sounded so lame. She straightened and said, surprised, "Are you jealous?" "Busted." I said, "I've come to see you as a woman in the short time I've known you. Like I told you in Miami, that can be tricky." I loved Heather for 24 long years, counting the courtship. And then, out of nowhere, she suddenly decided to run off with a guy who was only interested in one thing. I gave a bitter smile and said, "Forget the heartbreak. That kind of thing makes it hard to trust again." Since then, I've felt nothing but emptiness and deep distrust when it comes to women. I looked at her with warmth and said, "And then you came into my life. Everything about you is so beautiful and full of joy. More importantly, you chose to protect me on your own. I didn't ask you to. You did it because you wanted to. So it's natural to have feelings for you, to want to trust you and get closer to you. But you're also much younger than me, and the age gap feels huge." I frowned and said, "The guy you were with tonight seems great. He's handsome, nice, and fun. Most importantly, he's from your generation. The woman I was talking to is my age. She is beautiful and someone I would usually want to get to know better, but all I could think about was you and what you were doing." With emotion in my voice, I added, "So I went looking for you and found you with the perfect guy, the kind of guy I'd want my daughter to date. It's a perfectly normal outcome for such a beautiful young woman and a good guy to be together, but it tore me apart. So yes, I'm jealous. Jealous of your youth and all the opportunities ahead of you. More importantly, I'm jealous of every man who gets to hold you." She had been staring at me closely. Her eyes were bright. Finally, she said, "When I took your assignment, I also looked into your background in my special way." That was a scary thought. A hacker as skilled as Ariadne would know more about my life than I did. She could see things I had never seen, like school records, credit reports, and job evaluations. She gave me a soft look and said, "What I found was a good, honorable, and caring person who did his best despite all sorts of hardships. I also found out how exceptional you are, strong, smart, and creative. And honestly, I fell in love with you before I even met you. Since then, you have been everything I hoped for and more. Remember, my feelings for you started long before we met in person." Then she looked at me seriously, like she wanted to tell me something important. She said, "That's why I left my cover and came all the way from Boston to Key Largo. You need my help. But that's not the main reason I'm here. I'm with you because I believe you are my life partner. The women in my family stay with one partner for life," she added with a playful smile. "What you saw tonight was just a way to relieve some stress. It was about covering our tracks. But honestly, that's not the main reason. I love being romanced, and you can't do that for me yet. So I am enjoying a harmless flirtation with a nice guy." She then gave me a cheeky grin and said, "Soon, you will find out what really happens when I give myself to someone. It will be very different from what you've seen. I have only given my heart to one person, and that's you. That commitment has been there for much longer than we've been together." She finished with, "Yes, you're old enough to be my dad, and that might be more obvious now than it will be when I'm 60 and you're 79. But I feel like our spirits are perfectly matched, and I know that's why you feel like you can trust me." Then she added sincerely, "I'm asking you to trust your instincts. I will never betray you. I will be your friend, companion, and partner for life." Wow! We sat there looking at each other deeply. I reached for her, and you could see her mind closing off. She said with firm resolve, "If we let this happen now, we won't leave this cabin until we get back to Miami, and that wouldn't help us. We have a lifetime to love each other this way, once we make sure the dark web believes Tommy Meisner is really gone." She stood up and said, "Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering, you have already seen the most intimate I will ever be with another man. What attracts me to you is your strength, loyalty, and devotion, which is everything I ever wanted. You can expect the same from me. For now, I'm going to take a cold shower and go to bed. Do you need a cold shower too?" Girlish smirk. I looked at her as sincerely as I could and said, "No, I don't. What you just told me is more meaningful and moving than any physical experience I've had. I've looked into my heart and I trust you. I trust you so much that I'm not even going to remind you not to betray that trust. I know you won't because I know what kind of person you are. And I promise you that we'll still be together when I'm 79 and you're 60. You'll never regret being with me." The cruise continued in its strange way. I saw my friend from the nightclub a few times. She was always with some young, tanned guy. She always gave Ariadne a thorough look-over when we ran into her. Ariadne started avoiding her. Maybe she remembered something too. The last stop before St. Lucia was Martinique, Ariadne her new friend, and I spent the day shopping and visiting rum distilleries. It felt like the right thing to do with my daughter and her boyfriend. The guy, named Frank, was a genuinely good person. He worked as a network manager for the Dairy Farmers Association in Kansas City. He was 29 years old and had once played basketball at K-State. He kept calling me sir, which made me feel very old. Frank seemed to really like Ariadne. She clearly liked him too, holding his hand while walking and staying close to him. This should have bothered me, but to my surprise, I trusted her. Every time Frank tried to get too close, Ariadne would let him know her boundaries. One time, he put his hand on her shoulder and then on her chest. Ariadne didn't talk to him for an hour. He looked at me for help, so I spoke to her while she was sulking at another table. "Frank is sorry, sweetie. He won't do it again," I said. Frank stood there looking worried. She gave me a serious look and whispered, "Remember, my body is mine alone." Then she said loudly, "Okay, Daddy, I accept Frank's apology." She glared at Frank and said, "That better not happen again, understood?" She then softened her words with a sweet kiss. Frank looked relieved and happy. Ariadne's reassurance calmed me down. I watched her holding Frank's hand and chatting with him. She wore stylish short shorts that showed off her great legs and figure, making many men in the area stare. Some men might like slim legs, but I preferred strong and shapely ones. My ex-wife had lovely legs, but Ariadne's were even better, built like a dancer's but longer. She had a beautiful figure with strong hips. She stood there holding Frank's hand, with her hip out in a way that was hard for me to ignore. I had to leave, so I said, "I'm going back to the ship." Ariadne replied, "Can you and Frank go back by yourselves? I want to do more shopping." Frank quickly offered to stay with her, but she insisted, "No, I want to look around alone." Understanding her need for space, Frank and I took the boat back to the ship. I knew Ariadne was going to an internet cafe. Later, while getting ready for dinner, Ariadne rushed into the room excitedly. "I just checked. They might lift the bounty. They mostly think you're dead. There are a few holdouts, but I spent time convincing them," she said. It was clear that Ariadne had been working some contacts. Sometimes I forgot what she was truly capable of. The next day we arrived in Castries City, the capital of St. Lucia. We were close to South America, so the weather was very hot and humid. The greenery was lush, more so than in other parts of the Windward Islands. The air felt tropical. Our room on the ship had air conditioning. My dog, Buster, looked at me like I was crazy when I said, "Let's go for a walk." But we needed to leave everything behind, including Frank. We packed nothing, and Ariadne didn't either. We could get whatever we needed once we were on shore. Thanks to Ariadne's skills, it was easy to leave everything except for my dog. Ariadne's family had a villa in the Cap Estate area on the northern tip of the island, west of Rodney Bay. Castries City is to the south and east. We flagged down a local man named Jean-Claude, driving an old 1950s Plymouth taxi. He spoke with a fast island accent and talked non-stop about the local people. The villa belonged to 3 sisters and their families. One of them was Bill Hughes's wife. Ariadne was going to use it. The other 2 sisters were married, and Jean-Claude said he knew the younger sister's husband well. That man had even met his wife here. The 3rd sister was a wealthy businesswoman who had bought the villa. Jean-Claude told us that the sister was married to a mysterious man. The locals thought he worked for the CIA. When we arrived, the place was stunning. Jean-Claude dropped me, Ariadne, and Buster at the gate. The gate was a tall, strong iron structure about 15 feet high. Ariadne walked up to a keypad next to a speaker on the right pillar. She punched in an 8-number code, and the gate opened quietly. We walked down a driveway covered in crushed white coral, lined with trees, heading toward a house we still couldn't see. As we rounded a corner, the view took our breath away. The mansion was nestled into the side of a lush green hill. The hill stretched about a quarter-mile down to a 50-foot cliff overlooking a sparkling blue ocean. The house was bright white, and the grounds were green and beautifully kept. The air smelled of flowers and palm trees. All you could hear were the waves, birds, and someone mowing the lawn far below. I said, "This looks like a lot of money." Ariadne replied, "That's my Aunt Mary. My parents are well off, but they can't drop $4 million like Aunt Mary. She bought this place to help her new husband recover. He was hurt in Mexico where they met. Aunt Millie took care of him here. She's a famous surgeon, so she was the best person for the job." I thought, wow, The women in Ariadne's family are all amazing. As we walked toward the house, I wanted to clear the air. So I said, I know who you are, Chelsea. She wasn't surprised. She said, I figured that woman recognized me. She's the ex-wife of my dad's friend. She got a lot of money in the divorce even though she was unfaithful. I thought, is anyone ever loyal? Chelsea went on. Yes, my real name is Chelsea Hughes. I'm almost 29, a graduate of MIT, and I work for Motorola in Marlborough, Massachusetts. My dad is Bill Hughes, and my mom is Maddie. My family thinks I'm just an ordinary girl. No one knows about my other life, and I want to keep it that way. I smiled and said, You're not the Red Dragon, and Tommy Meisner is dead. We keep each other's secrets. She smiled back, surprised. She said, Always together, just you and me, no one coming between us. That's all I ever wanted. One person, one love. Her words warmed my heart. St. Lucia used to be a French island, so the housekeeper was French. She greeted Chelsea like a family member. This was a different side of Chelsea. She was playing the lovely family princess role. It felt strange knowing her as I did. This princess act didn't match her sharp mind or her history. Chelsea had always been the pretty debutante. I could see how tough it must have been for her to meet all those high, refined expectations, especially with her fiery spirit. That was probably why she rebelled. The Red Dragon was the complete opposite of the girly girl image her family wanted. I finally asked about her hacking skills. We sat on the patio, watching the beautiful tropical day. I said, It must have been hard for you growing up. Is that why you turned to hacking? She gave a sad smile and said, You have no idea. Expectations for someone like me were really crushing. She said, My parents are rich, and I'm beautiful. They have open minds, especially my mom, but they couldn't see past my looks. With some anger in her voice, she added, My older half-brother Billy is a Blue Angels pilot. My younger sister Janie plays on the U.S. national women's soccer team. My youngest brother Tom is also a hacker, like me, but he's a good guy. We've been on opposite sides more than once. With a mischievous smile, she continued, I knew it was him, but no one would guess the Red Dragon is little Chelsea Hughes, belle femme of Georgetown. Both my dad and Aunt Millie's husband are big in computer security. They trained Tom, but never thought to train me. I was only supposed to be the pretty gem for the family and perfect for marriage. Her voice filled with anger as she said, So, when I got to MIT, I dived into the dark side. The classes were boring and too easy, so I had a lot of free time. Plus, I had access to hacker culture through the students. I thought, boring? Easy? Who is this woman? Chelsea continued. The more I hacked, the better I got. I started with small tasks. It was a social game among students, but those were too easy, so I moved on to small jobs from ads on the dark web. I liked the thrill of being bad, and I got better and better until I gained the reputation I have now. She said, not with pride, but with sadness, I was still the beautiful Chelsea. I lived a preppy girl's life, which is common in Cambridge. But I started focusing on bigger hacks, which took all my time. So I stopped having a social life. She looked at me seriously and said, As you know, the internet is like a whole different world. It was the only place where I was judged for my skills, not my looks. It felt freeing, and I got hooked. I did everything to keep up the act that my life was normal, like lovely Chelsea going to work and sometimes going out. But my real life was online as the Red Dragon, and I felt very alone. She had a brooding look, one I used to wear before meeting her. She said, I felt no connection with anyone and was completely shut off emotionally. That is, until I got your case. At first I thought you were just a nerd with a grudge. But the more I dug into your background, the more I saw who you were, how hurt you had been, and how bravely you faced it. So, I looked deeper. Her face brightened, and she said, The more I learned about you, the closer I felt to you, until I had a deep crush, even though you were just a faceless person to me. I couldn't contact you without losing my own secrecy, and I couldn't trust you enough for that. But when my team decided you were a target, I knew I had to act, no matter what happened to me. She looked at me seriously and said, I want to be honest with you. I've probably stolen $400 or $500 million as the Red Dragon, mostly from companies that didn't even notice it was gone. I gave away most of that money to charities and people in need. I kept a few million for myself. I might be a thief, but I've never intentionally hurt anyone, except your ex-wife and her friends. They deserved what happened to them, and I can be very protective when someone I love is hurt." She got a brief look of satisfaction, like she was remembering a pleasant moment, like a good meal or a fun day at the beach. It was astounding. I realized that even before we met, I was important to her. Her empathy toward me was more amazing than her hacking skills. She smiled grimly and said, "Nobody will ever catch me because I'm like a ghost. The internet is perfect for people like me." I already knew that. But she was laying it all out, and I felt it was important to let her finish her confession. She said with pride, "Everybody thinks the Red Dragon Revolution is a group of hackers in China. Nobody would guess that the whole organization is just a 28-year-old girl living in Cambridge, Massachusetts." I completely understood what she was saying. Thanks to strong encryption and many proxy servers, there was no way a hacker like her would ever get caught. Chelsea's hacking didn't bother me any more than her past. That was in the past, a different situation. Now she chose to be with me, and that choice was why I trusted her. You can't truly love someone if you don't trust them. Trust is built through shared experiences and understanding each other. For 22 years, Heather and I were more or less in sync. Then she lost that connection. Her hurtful actions showed that. Her lack of empathy made it easy for me to walk away from her. But with Chelsea, there was no doubt that we were on the same page about understanding and respecting each other. So I trusted her completely. I said, "Okay, I know how you got here, and you know how I got here. So what are you going to do now?" She looked at me lovingly and said, "I will be your lifelong companion and friend. Until we have children, then we will also be parents." She paused and looked at me seriously. She said, "I know you were a wonderful dad. I also know this will be your second time doing this. Sadly. So I am willing to raise our children mostly on my own. I come from a big family and I love kids. So I want to have 3 or 4. Chelsea's assumptions were reasonable. It showed how much she cared about me. I had been there and done all the parenting stuff. But Chelsea didn't understand that she was offering me a new beginning. The first time I did everything right, married, had kids. That part of my life was great. Then Heather's actions took it all away. After the divorce, I felt like my whole life had been a waste. Then this wonderful woman came out of nowhere and gave me a fresh start. I would get to live all the good moments from my past marriage again and maybe not make the same mistakes. Getting together with Heather was typical for young, carefree love. But this time, I wanted things to be different with my wonderful Chelsea. We planned to talk about everything first. Chelsea was honest and smart, and I felt I could talk about delicate things with her openly. I knew that once we had this talk, I could be sure of her full commitment, but I had to be clear about my expectations, just in case. I asked, "Are we talking about marriage here? If so, I have 2 conditions." Her face showed worry. She probably thought I would say something unreasonable. I said, "First, I need you to stop the dangerous activities. They've caused enough trouble, and I don't want the mother of my children to end up in serious trouble again." She looked relieved. I continued, "And I don't want us to misunderstand each other. Anytime one of us has a concern, we must talk about it, no matter how sensitive. If my ex-wife had told me about her worries early on, we might still be married. But by the way, I'm happy because being with you is so much better." She smiled shyly, and I added, "In a happy marriage, there can't be secrets. We need to always be on the same page, so you have to promise to talk about any problem that comes up, and we will solve it together." She nodded quickly while I was speaking. I said, "You look like you have something to say." She, smiling broadly, said, "Of course I agree with everything, but more importantly, when do we get to celebrate our marriage?" I got up to face her, and she threw herself into my arms, wrapping one arm around my neck while her other hand pulled me into a deep kiss. For a moment I thought, she's only 28. I tend to overthink things. Then she let out a loud, delighted moan. Part of my brain recalled hearing a similar sound in a different context, but I brushed the thought away. Her mouth was open and she was making joyful noises. It was clear she wasn't going to let go of me anytime soon. I lifted her up with ease since she was so light. I carried her across the patio and into our bedroom. The door was open, and the sea breeze was flowing in. I placed her gently on the bed. The room faced the ocean, and everything felt perfect. She kept her arms around my neck, kissing me passionately. I had to focus, as she seemed lost in the moment. She was breathing heavily and making little sounds of joy as her lips moved on mine and her tongue played within my mouth. My last thought before fully giving in was, Chelsea Hughes must be the most passionate and smart woman I know. I gently removed her arms from my neck and laid her on the bed. She looked both beautiful and eager. Her chest rose and fell with each breath, and her eyes were filled with love. She wore a light sundress which had ridden up to her waist. It was clear from her movements and sounds that she wanted to continue, and I didn't want to keep her waiting. I had imagined a more romantic first time together, but our emotions had built up too much. All I could do was be present in the moment with her. I positioned myself, and she welcomed me eagerly. The feel of her was intense. She seemed just as impatient for this moment as I was. Chelsea was a mix of grace and strength. Though small, she seemed incredibly powerful in her love. Her movements were natural and filled with passion. I had never experienced this kind of connection before. We spent a few weeks enjoying the peace and comfort that wealth can bring. The lovemaking was wild, more like an affair than married life. We were like young lovers. Chelsea was full of energy, spirited, and giving. Me? Not as much. We accepted the age difference. She had to get used to the fact that I was 47 years old, and I had to get used to her free-spirited attitude. I enjoyed her enthusiasm, but was clearly not as young as I used to be. That didn't matter to Chelsea. She took eagerly, but also gave generously. It was clear that the lovemaking was just her way of showing love, not the only thing she wanted. If I couldn't keep up, she would just hug me with a blissful look on her face. Chelsea was very different from Heather. She was deeper emotionally and more intelligent. Most importantly, although the lovemaking was incredible, it wasn't the main thing. It was just a part of our strong connection and attraction to each other. We were both remade as a couple by our union. In my case, that change was real. Records are kept on computers, and with Chelsea's skills, she could reshape my identity. I became a millionaire investor in humanitarian projects. My social media profile was perfectly crafted, as was my new history. Chelsea, called the Red Dragon, painted a picture of me as simple, loving, and honorable. But the active, sophisticated man she created, with some help from Photoshop, was someone even my ex-wife wouldn't recognize. My past life photos needed changes. I had been faceless to the hacker world, but those who knew me would still remember what I looked like. So a man people thought was dead, but who kept showing up on Facebook, could make anyone curious. I had vanished at sea. At least, that's what the fake documents that Chelsea had made said. According to those, I'd gone out on a small fishing boat many miles into the Gulf and never came back. So, Thomas Miller Meisner was declared dead. I had good life insurance, and between that, my 401k, and the sale of my trailer, both kids managed fine. It wasn't their fault that their mom lost her mind. I still follow them on social media. Chelsea and I decided to marry in a small ceremony at our place. Because I was not a real person and her big family wouldn't get it, we kept it private. Only the justice of the peace and a couple of paid witnesses, one being the always-present Jean-Claude, were there. Because my past was fake, we needed some time before meeting her family. Chelsea came from a loving family and was the star. Her sudden marriage would make them worry. We didn't want to explain who I was, so we agreed to keep our marriage secret for now. The wedding night wasn't special because every night with Chelsea was perfect. When I came out of the bathroom, there she was, looking beautiful. It made me feel lucky. Heather had left me, and now this amazing woman made my life peaceful and full of love. It seemed unlikely we would end up together. I was 19 years older, had been hurt in my first marriage, and didn't want to trust again. Chelsea in her real life was like a fairy tale princess, with beauty, brains, and a rich lifestyle. She was also a powerful and feared figure in the business world. There was no way we should have fit together, but we did. We bonded deeply, and I knew we would always stay together. We both wanted to spend our lives with someone who understood us completely. Chelsea realized our connection while turning my life upside down. She was very smart, and decided to be with me even before she met me. I felt the same almost immediately, even while she was saving me from a bad place on the internet. I was smart enough to see she was different from Heather and started to trust her. I knew I wouldn't regret it. It's what's inside that counts. I missed that the first time. But my new wife's loving and caring spirit spoke to me. As she moved the covers, she said, "Welcome to your life, my love." She hugged me tightly. I said, "Thank you for giving it to me, my love." Epilogue: Chelsea was sitting at the computer in our den. She might be shopping online, or she might be causing problems for a big company. With her skills, you never know. Little Brookie, our 5-year-old, was giggling nearby. It seemed like Chelsea was already showing her a new world. I've never had a problem knowing my lovely wife could cause real trouble for anyone or anything she wanted. I knew what she could do before we married, but I also knew Chelsea was very moral in her way. She hates bullies and people who hurt others, so sometimes she has to use her skills to stop them. It's just a hobby for her, but it's a big part of my life. Some people have wives who win cooking contests. Mine is like a secret global superhero. She is passionate about fixing big wrongs. I feel the same way. But while regular husbands might wish they could do something about injustice, my wife can actually do it, even if she sometimes causes big political changes. More importantly, it's not just Chelsea's choice to act. We think it over together and weigh the pros and cons. It might be taking justice into our own hands, but we do it as a team. It shows how close we are. I want to share with you how proud I am watching my beautiful wife Chelsea take on the bad guys with her quick and clever computer skills. Overall, I am a happy and satisfied man. Chelsea is the perfect wife, even while she's busy saving the world. We decided to settle down for good in St. Lucia, so we bought a house near Donkey Beach. I won't go into how we paid for it, but let's just say we split the cost through some secret accounts. Enough time had passed that we decided it was time for me to meet Chelsea's parents. It had to happen sooner or later, but we rushed it because Chelsea was already 3 months pregnant. I was really nervous. It was clear I looked much older beside my petite, expecting wife, and I felt like an old man taking advantage of a younger woman, especially since her mother was only 2 years older than me. Her mom, Maddie, was perhaps the most attractive older woman I'd ever seen, quite different from her daughter. Chelsea is about 5 feet tall, small, and delicate. Maddie is 5'2", but has a very curvy body. Where Chelsea seems calm and smart, Maddie has a more intense, sensual presence. Still, both share great intelligence and inner strength. Chelsea's dad, Hughes, and I had never met, so I wasn't worried he would recognize me. But it was strange meeting someone from my past. Both parents were surprisingly understanding. It seemed like they had been through something similar, meeting and marrying someone unexpected. We had a made-up story that Chelsea had created involving charity balls and a whirlwind romance in Boston. It was a believable tale, but completely false. It didn't matter anyway. Chelsea and Maddie were too excited about the baby, a little girl we decided to name Brooklyn. Maddie loved children so much that she didn't care how the baby was conceived. As a result, she and Hughes moved into our house at Cap Estates to be closer to their grandchild. It seemed like Hughes didn't have much choice in the matter. The birth of Brooklyn changed my life. It made up for all the pain I had gone through with my ex, Heather. I loved that little baby more than words can say. She had a full head of red hair and all the beauty of her mother. Most importantly, she was my special angel. My life would be dedicated to making her happy, watching Chelsea and Brooklyn laugh together. I felt my usual worries creep in. It felt like too much good luck for someone like me. But then I reminded myself with a little irony, life is longer than we think, and we can fix things in the end. If you stick around, make good choices, and follow through, you can turn anything around. All my hopes and dreams didn't disappear when Heather betrayed me. Instead, I found better ones. Sure, it took some luck, but as soon as Chelsea came into my life, I knew what I wanted. More importantly, I went after it with all my heart. So if there's a lesson in my story, it's this. Your life is shaped by your choices, and you're not out of options until you're gone. So when the right chance comes, grab it and don't let go. That simple wisdom is the real foundation of my happy new life. Hey, audience. If you like this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.